Good evening. A quorum of the City Council being present, I call tonight's meeting to order. Let's please rise to salute the flag and pause for a moment of silence. If we can remember the victims of the shooting in New Zealand, over 50 now, I believe, innocent people who lost their lives. Vice Mayor Devereaux, you had a...
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd also like to add a moment of silence for my friend Asa Brebner, who was a well-known musician, although it's sort of ironic to have a moment of silence for someone who made a lot of noise, joyful noise. I'd like to remember him. Thank you.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will do this again at the announcements section, but while there are probably more people tuning in now, tomorrow night at 7 o'clock there will be a vigil on City Hall steps for the victims of the shooting. Tonight's meeting is being recorded with audio and visual devices. There are listening aids available for anyone in the public who may need them. On a motion by Vice Mayor Devereaux to accept the minutes of February 11th, 2019. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move on to public comment. Public comment is the time in the meeting when the public can speak for up to 3 minutes on an issue on tonight's agenda, with the exception of awaiting reports and communications. We ask that, to your left, you will see a screen that will have the name of the speaker as well as the name of the next speaker, and it will count down your 3 minutes. At 15 seconds, you'll hear the first tone, which will be your signal to start to wrap things up. And at the end of 3 minutes, you'll hear a second tone, which is the indication that your time has expired. We ask that you direct all comments to the chair, not to individual councilors. If you have written comments, there is a basket next to the podium. We ask that you please leave your written comments. It makes that much easier on our clerk. If you have electronic comments, there are business cards out there where you can email your comments to the clerk by midnight tonight, and they will appear in the minutes for this meeting. We also ask folks in the audience to please refrain from clapping, snapping, booing, when a person is speaking. We want everyone to feel welcome and respected in the chamber. If you are the one person in the room that is expressing an opinion different than the folks in the audience, we still want you to have your time, and we want you to be respected. So with that, we will go to the first person on the list, George Schneelock, followed by Itmar Turner-Trawing.
George Schneelock, 81 School Street, Apartment 1 in Somerville, speaking on CMA item number 1 and CRT number 4, the Cycling Safety Ordinance. In the city's biannual survey, for the first time, they asked residents if they want more protected bike lanes. The question was not about bike safety or people's opinion of biking, but instead it asked a very direct question. Do you want to see the city build more protected bike lanes? By a 38-point margin, residents said yes, we need more protected bike lanes. The city and city council should remember that. When someone says they know what the residents really want and that residents don't really want a protected bike lane, the hard evidence actually shows the opposite. A large majority of residents want protected bike lanes, and the city should not ignore them. Recently, I learned that Somerville has proposals to build more than 4 miles of protected bike lanes and bike bus lanes just in this year, 2019. Despite having a third of the money in its budget compared to Cambridge, Somerville has proposals that actually match the urgency of this issue. Last year, Cambridge Bike Safety circulated a petition calling on the city to build 4 miles of protected bike lanes per year. There is an overwhelming mandate to get this network of protected bike lanes built. Somerville is already forging ahead despite far fewer resources. Cambridge has not come close to 4 miles per year. With the survey results, this mandate for safe bike infrastructure, the city no longer has any excuse for delay. The City Council should vote to pass the cycling safety ordinance to a second reading so that the building out of this network can be a legal requirement and not an option. But as it was pointed out in the Ordinance Committee meeting, this ordinance will not do much over the next 5 years because there is little overlap between the bike network and the 5-year sidewalk and street reconstruction plan. The city needs to dramatically increase its construction of quick-built protected bike lanes so that the public can get what it wants, more protected bike lanes so that people of all ages and abilities can get around safely. Thank you.
Thank you. And I forgot to mention, when you come up, please state your name, your address, and the issue you're speaking on.
My name is Itamar Turner-Trowering. I live at 139 Oxford Street in Cambridge. Spear support the Medicare for All, Section 8 funding, and cycling ordinance. These are all issues that particularly impact people with low income. I just signed up for healthcare through the market, the state market, and it's expensive, but I'm okay. But this is not, this way what we have now is not okay for people on a low income, and so it's important that the council show its support for Medicare for All. Similarly, housing is a major issue in the city, and again, we should be funding it, but the city can also be doing far more than it is right now to support it. And then we come to transportation, and transportation is actually something where the city has a huge amount of influence because the city controls the streets, the city controls infrastructure. The city could be providing transportation infrastructure that doesn't require owning an expensive car, and the city doesn't. We don't have enough dedicated bus lanes. We have far fewer protected bike lanes than we need, which means biking is dangerous, which if you can't afford healthcare is a significant problem. And so the cycling safety ordinance is a good first step, but the city needs to do, and I urge you to support it and to pass it without changes, but it is a long-term solution for one part of the problem, and we also need more dedicated bus lanes along Mass Ave, and we need more frequent buses, which the city could fund if it chose, and we need actual protected bike lanes being built now, not over the course of 30 years. So please support the ordinance, but it is a long-term solution. In the short term, you need to build far more and more quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Boswell, followed by Sean McFarland.
Good evening, councilors. My name is Mark Boswell. I live at 105 Walden Street in Cambridge. I'm here tonight because I'd like to express my support for the cycling safety ordinance as it is written. I was at the last meeting of the Ordinance Committee and was very encouraged by your clear and broad support for this important safety measure. I now ask that you continue that support. My understanding is there was a long, careful process of give and take that led to the specific language that it contains. The language ensures that the terms are agreeable to both safety-minded residents and the city staff. I ask you preserve the language, neither weakening it nor strengthening it. Its compromises sensibly allow for flexibility when needed in order to attain the important goal of improved safety for people on bikes and indeed all users of the roads. I look forward to seeing this effort move forward, and thanks for your consideration on this important transportation alternative.
Thank you. Thank you. Sean McFarland.
Good evening, councilors. My name is Sean McFarland. I live over at 52 Pearl Street. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak this evening. So I'm here to speak in favor of three things: the two policy orders, 13 and 15, for the housing vouchers and Medicare for All, and on the cycling safety ordinance. And I'll probably start with cycling, I guess. So I think it's really exciting, the progress that's been made on the front of cycling recently in the city. And though I'm very fortunate to mostly be able to get everywhere I need to go by walking, I nevertheless wanted to share my support for it because I think it's really important that we move as much as possible away from things that require car trips. And I know there's a lot of tension within the community about the dependency on cars for independence, but I think that we've got a lot of really smart and creative people here, and I think that we can figure out ways to make everyone happy in that regard. In terms of housing, obviously that's a perennially high-profile issue here for a variety of reasons. It's a very multifaceted problem, requires a lot of sort of factors to solve. And the more money that we can bring to bear on that, especially if we can get it from the federal government through housing vouchers for people to be able to secure housing, that's always a positive. I don't think I need to probably say too much more to convince you all of that. And likewise, in Medicare for All fronts, this struck home for me very personally. 4 winters ago, I was visiting my parents at home for Christmas, and one of my lungs spontaneously collapsed, which is kind of a weird thing to have happen, but I was fortunate at the time to be on insurance, and so for the 40 days that I spent in the hospital and the 3 surgeries I had, my bill ended up being around $3,000, but if I hadn't had that insurance, it would have been around $200,000, and I would certainly not be standing here talking to you right now. So Medicare for All is certainly something we need, and I think from a place as progressive as Cambridge, this is a no-brainer. So that's all. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Bill Cavallini, followed by Ann Kamara.
Good evening. My name is Bill Cavallini. I live at 33 Oak Street in Somerville. I'm here tonight to support Order Number 83, Policy Order Number 83, which refers to request of the Department of Transportation to reconsider the fact that they have not provided access to the Union Square Green Line extension station from the Cambridge side. There's no elevator as there was in the original plan. When the first plan for the Green Line extension was submitted for bid, it went over budget, and the next plan that came in had no elevator, no stair access to the Union Square station from the Cambridge side. You have to walk almost into Union Square, Somerville, to get to the station platform. And that's what this order speaks to. I live a block and a half from the station, coming from the Cambridge side. I live between Inman Square and Union Square. People that live on Harding, Hunting, in the East Cambridge area, near Boynton Yards, they will have to walk almost all the way to Union Square to get to the platform. They will walk to Union Square and then have to come back in the opposite direction to get to the platform. So we are negotiating with the master developer for Union Square's revitalization, $1.5 billion development. We're trying to get that developer to join us in our requests for better access, and we hope that the whole City Council of Cambridge will join us in that effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann Kamara, followed by Charles Franklin. Ann, your address didn't come up here. If you could make sure you give your address, please.
Hello, my name is Ann Kamara. I'm from 53 Hanson Street in Somerville. So I'm also on the Union Square Neighborhood Council Board, and I've been 42 years out of Union Square off of Beacon Street. But I grew up here at Donley Field. So the Green Line has always been important to us. I'm here for both sides, and we need something at our border and not a wall. We need an elevator. So I think what happened here is that the contract that was made originally was with a certain design for that area, and now we need a new contract with the MBTA. Let me see. It's important for everybody, businesses, residents. I'm a person with a physical challenge, and everybody knows Prospect Street. To go up and down and all the way around is going to be absolutely impossible for people coming from the Cambridge, Prospect, Columbia, Roosevelt Towers, Harding. I have, friends still there, and I think it's really difficult to come from that area and come all the way down the round. And there's a department in the MBTA called RTAG, and they said that every stop on the Green Line, on any train line, has to have an elevator. And this is from the MBTA. RTAG is part of the MBTA. So both Cambridge and Somerville has invested in the Green Line, and I think we need to demand that an elevator be put there. And thank you.
Thank you. Charles Franklin, followed by Sue Butler.
Good afternoon. Charles Franklin, 162 Hampshire Street. Okay, I'm going to try and keep it short today. So, housing, health, and safety are rights. Therefore, I strongly support the policy orders on Section 8 funding, Medicare for all, as well as the zoning ordinance for the bike safety. All three of these things are necessary. If we have to tell the federal government, please do this, we have to tell them. If we can do it ourselves, then we should do it ourselves, even if it means finding more money for it. I've already said it here before, I'll say it again. You can raise my taxes. Raise my taxes, and let's pay for some of this stuff. The Green Line, it's unimaginable that they wouldn't put an elevator there. I can't believe they're not going to do that. That's just ridiculous. I'm not going to go into why it's ridiculous. I think other people have already said that. And lastly, I want to talk about, it's on here somewhere, I'm sure, but I want to talk about love and not hate. On Friday, there was a lot of love in Cambridge. A lot of love in Cambridge. I was walking home, and I was passed by the Islamic Society of Boston, and I saw a dozen residents standing with signs of love and welcoming our Muslim community. And it was so moving. It almost brought me to tears, actually, to know that we live in a community that's so open and so welcome. I called my boss or emailed him and said, I'm coming back to work later. I have to stand here with these people. I have to stand with my neighbors because I live right down the street. So those are my neighbors there. And I love my neighbors. Love thy neighbor. Thank you, Cambridge. Never change.
Sue Butler, followed by Christopher Lucy.
I'll second that. Love your neighbor. It's a great community, and I'm glad it's home. I'm Sue Butler. I live at 14 Clinton Street. I serve on many committees, Sierra Club Energy Committee and Executive Committee, and I'm always thinking, as you know, about sustainability. There are a number of policy orders tonight that really address those issues. Policy Order 1, making things safer. Policy Order 3 on accessibility or safety for mobility impaired people. Clearing sidewalks, Policy Order 4. And Policies Orders 9 and 10 on bicycles, bicycle management, getting good feedback on bicycle management in the city, are all going to contribute to positive quality in urban life. And if we have people walking and biking more, it's fewer vehicles. Boston and thereby Cambridge too is #1 for the worst traffic in the nation. Let's get people walking and biking. So all of those I really am very glad to see. And finally, on Policy Order number 5, on the opioid problem, I recently heard a very good presentation by Marianne Ryan, who's Middlesex District Attorney, on restorative practices in their office for people who are suffering and struggling with opioid addiction. So that committee might benefit by coordinating and collaborating with the Middlesex District Attorney's office. Thank you for doing a good job.
Thank you. Christopher Lucy, followed by Susan Markowitz.
Thank you, Mayor McGovern and assembled council members this evening. I'm here to speak on Policy Order number 12. And I just want to say that in the Gilded Age, a bicycle was probably the most advanced form of personal transportation possibly available to any person. And bicycles are still with us, but there are other forms of transportation that are in the works and are also technologically advanced that could help us to reduce the congestion in our streets, improve the amount of efficiency of our populace getting to and fro from places. We all are familiar with public transit, and we know that it's suffering under tremendous burden, a shortfall of revenue, a burden of incapacity for the service. These are issues that are discussed in almost every metropolitan town. And these devices, when they come, along with automated delivery and other transportation devices, cars that will drive themselves, will have the ability of reducing the congestion, taking cars off the road, off the street, and still allowing us personal mobility in the urban fabric. So I urge you all to consider these issues. I've read about some of them. I've seen them around town at universities and some of the symposiums. And I think that it's time for the cities and towns and the state itself to think of a regulatory structure that will allow these devices to be integrated into the transportation flow. And thank you very much. Oh, and address, you want my address? It's, I'm not a Canterbridgian, but it's 107 South Street, like the train terminal, Unit 3B, Boston, Mass. 02111-2840, and the name is Christopher Lucy. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Markowitz? Followed by Heather Hoffman.
Hi, my name is Susan Markowitz. I live at 20 Oak Street in Cambridge. I'm here tonight to support the Policy Order 83 that Denise Simmons is sponsoring. The Mass DOT should definitely revisit and review the plans for the forthcoming Union Square T station so that, first, those people with mobility impairments will have access to it. Second, the stairs or an elevator adjacent to the bridge would shorten the distance to the T for all Cambridge residents. And third, it will make shopping for Inman Square businesses more attractive to incoming riders. My understanding is that in order to save money, the developer of the Union Square T station is deleting from the original plan the elevator from the Prospect Street Bridge to the Union Square T station, about 14 or 15 feet below, something like that. Now pedestrians coming from Inman Square will have to walk northbound 2/3 of the way to Somerville Ave on the Prospect Street Bridge, only to then have to travel back southbound more than about half the distance back to the station platform at the lower level. It seems to me that given that Cambridge has put in millions of dollars to implement this plan, it doesn't seem fair that Cambridge residents will then have to walk a longer distance or an unnecessarily long distance when the redesign of the plan would ameliorate this. Thank you.
Thank you. Heather Hoffman, followed by Tom Joyce.
Hello, Heather Hoffman, 213 Hurley Street. I wanted to start by requesting a slight correction to the committee report on the Better Bus Project. I think perhaps I did not express myself well, but in the description of what I said, what I meant was the bus routes have been changed slightly in the minds of the MBTA, but the bus routes that serve East Cambridge no longer serve East Cambridge, important locations, the way they used to. And it's only going to get worse when the Green Line extension comes online. So it's not that we lost bus routes, we lost bus service. I have a few things I wanted to talk about. The Breaking Ground exhibit at MIT's utility plant. If you missed it, you should be sad. It was incredible. And if we were really lucky, we could get them to come back because it was only 2 days for a few hours. And 3rd and Spring Streets, as I understand it, we're supposed to be getting stop signs. That's going to be fun since it's a neighborhood sport to blow through them. But yeah, it's a dangerous intersection, and it is made so by people driving like idiots. And of course, We should have better access to a Green Line station that is going to serve a chunk of Cambridge that has gotten lousy service from the MBTA forever. And we should also make sure that Leechmere Station gets good access from the neighborhoods that it is supposed to be serving. I mean, in general, that's the way the MBTA has dealt with escalating costs, like just make it hard to get into the station. And then there are a lot of things on here about housing and medical expenses and other things that are basic to being able to live decently. We need to cover people so that they can go see a medical professional when they need to. I had an argument with a temporary roommate who would be homeless otherwise about insurance today, and I was trying to explain to him that insurance means creating pools when we share expenses, and that was a little above his pay grade, I guess. But that's what it's about. We need to all put in so that all of us can get what we need when we need it. And housing is the same way. We need to be able to do this. And sorry, I hadn't noticed that there were no sounds.
There was no bell, I don't know.
Yeah, but my last sentence is the city has done a really terrible job of explaining its proposals. You need to do better. You've created enemies you didn't need. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Joyce?
My name is Tom Joyce. I live at 270 3rd Street. I'm speaking concerning the policy order on the intersection of 3rd and Spring. Although I now live at 270 3rd Street, for 10 years I lived at 46 Spring Street and then 50 Spring Street, both of which overlooked this intersection. For the next decade, I lived a block away. When I lived on Spring Street, I practically lived in that intersection. In the letter from Mayor McGovern and Councilor Toomey, they mentioned the multitude of accidents at that corner. During the time I lived at particularly 50 Spring Street, I made many of those calls myself. It got to the point where I would be sitting in my living room, I'd hear the screech of brakes, the crash, I'd go for 911 before I'd even look out the window. And as a member of the East Cambridge planning team, I have been to a multitude of meetings with people from traffic and parking about traffic issues in East Cambridge. Never once did I attend a meeting where this wasn't a primary intersection discussed, usually the first intersection discussed in any meeting. For years, we've fought for a traffic light or a stop sign. And in a very sad commentary, Sue Clippinger once told me, former traffic director, we can't have a traffic light at that intersection because nobody has died there. And that is a really sad excuse that we can't have a safe intersection until somebody gives their life. Now we've been promised a four-way stop, and that should help. We should at least start there and consider if that doesn't work, go for the traffic light. And I have seen there's a primary way that virtually all the accidents that I have witnessed are the same scenario. And by the way, I walk through this intersection to and from work every day, so I am still to this day, very familiar with it. They tried to calm traffic on 3rd Street by putting a bump out at Thorndike. The cars coming down from Cambridge Street slow down for that bump out, but as soon as they get back on Cambridge Street, on 3rd Street, with the courthouses on either side, they hit the accelerators and they're speeding up. Meanwhile, people coming up 3rd Street can't see around that stone wall. They stick their noses out to get across the street and they slam. They've hit my parked car at that intersection. I'm sure many of you know Barbara Broussard, former president of the planning team. She had her car broadsided at that same intersection, parked. So we have to do something. It seems the four-way stop that's been promised to us is at least the first step. I don't know why it's promised to us over a year ago and it's still not there. At this point, I just ask you all to follow Councilor Toomey and Mayor McGovern, see that this gets done so we can do whatever we can to make that intersection safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Hassan Rashid?
Right, peace be unto you. Hello, everybody. I'm Hassan Rashid. I reside at 820 Massachusetts Avenue. My public comment is concerning agenda item communications and reports number 1A. During the mayor's Blue Ribbon Task Force meeting on tenant displacement held on February 24, 2019, Richard C. Rossi Assistant Fund was referred to in supplemental material provided at the meeting as an attachment. I questioned the efficacy and truth of the assistant fund because it was produced during the time when I was petitioning the city for a homeless trust fund, etc. As I see it, the assistant fund is established to divert and tie up valuable community revenue away from humble citizen participatory efforts such as the Homeless Trust Fund, initiated to help alleviate some of the suffering that comes along with homelessness, etc. I intend to, with God's truth and help, sometime in the near future to resubmit my petition for a homeless trust fund, etc., that had nebulously disappeared from the table of further discussion at City Hall among our city administrators and municipal policymakers during the time when the assistant fund was publicly set in motion. In conclusion, people, don't be fooled. A local homeless trust fund can equal or surpass the aid to the homeless sector in Mosaic that is currently being disseminated publicly at large by such a nebulous fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Farah Rador.
Good afternoon. My name is Farah Radori. I am not a Cambridge resident, but I'm here today representing the office of Senator Elizabeth Warren. I am the regional director for Cambridge at the Senator's Boston office, and I will be reading a statement on behalf of the Senator regarding her housing bill titled American Housing and Economic Mobility Act. I also have copies of the summary of the bill that I have given to the mayor's chief of staff. As you know, skyrocketing rents are squeezing Cambridge residents, and the shameful legacy of housing discrimination means that families of color are getting hit the hardest. It's time to stop nibbling around the edges of the affordable housing crisis and take bold, decisive action to confront it head on. Senator Warren's legislation, the American Housing and Economic Mobility Act, would invest billions of federal dollars to fill funding gaps and build on rehabilitate 3.2 million new housing units. These new homes would be required to have rents that poor and working families can afford. An independent analysis found that this bill would bring down rents by 10% or $100 per month. Under the Affordable Housing and Economic Mobility Act, cities, regions, or states that make it easier to produce well-located, affordable housing would be eligible to compete for new federal grant funding to build roads, infrastructure, and schools. Communities like Cambridge could use this funding to address infrastructure and constraints and help make affordable housing investments work for everyone. Senator Warren's bill also takes the first step towards addressing the racial wealth gap through a down payment assisting program targeted at residents of low-income, formerly redlined communities, and makes big new investments in helping families that are still struggling to recover from the financial crisis and owe more on their mortgages than their homes are worth. Senator Warren is deeply thankful for all the support her legislation has received so far, including Mayor McGovern's endorsement. She appreciates his sponsorship of this policy order with Councilors Siddiqui and Malone. She looks forward to partnering with the City of Cambridge and local leaders in the Commonwealth and across the country to ensure that the federal government is doing its part to address the needs of our communities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone who did, James? Anyone who did not sign up for public comment who would like to speak to an issue on tonight's agenda, with the exception of communications and awaiting reports? James, you're first.
Thank you. James Williamson, 1000 Jackson Place. First of all, I'd like to say something. There is a resolution for Asa Brebner, and I just want to say what a loss, what a great, awesome guitar player, and people who knew him better than I do probably could say other things about him as well. But he used to play at the Plow and Stars, he used to play at Toad, I mean, he played all over town, and he was superb and gave a lot of people a lot of pleasure. So it was quite a shock to learn that he had passed unexpectedly. On the city survey, I hope that it's too much to get into the detail of it here during public comment, but I hope you will sort of dig into it a bit, all of you, and sort of interrogate both the methodology. 400 phone, it's a survey, there are phone calls, 400 and 100 and some were to cell phones. And then the way the numbers are summarized, as I took a quick glance at some of the numbers, what I worry about is that if it's not really accurately interpreted and understood, that some maybe not well substantiated interpretation is going to be used to further something that maybe doesn't deserve it based on the way the numbers are being interpreted. Now, maybe there's a robust result, and that can be if it's legitimate, then fine, but I'm not quite sure. And so I hope you'll be careful and thoughtful about how you interpret and how anybody tries to make use of it. On the so-called Better Bus Project, I think a number of you have heard that not everybody thinks it's a better bus. It's a robust set of improvements. It's actually a net zero. There are no additional resources involved, which is what we really need for the T to improve service. So it's whatever it's doing in one part of a route, it's taking away from another part of a route. The key interest that I have is the number one, the elimination of the loop around Harvard Yard for the number one. The buses would just turn down Dunster Street, whereas one city councilor pointed out they might get stuck in traffic or, double parked cars. But the thing about I was just at the stop on the far side of Harvard Yard. 3 other people showed up at the stop. None of them was a student. They were all people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And the only way, it seems to me, that it would be justified to go forward with eliminating the loop that the number one takes around Harvard Yard would be to insist as a condition of that everybody who currently rides the T will be able to take the medical area shuttle, that Harvard will still be running around that far side of Harvard Yard. They got a $16 million mass development loan to support new buses for the medical area buses. We don't get to ride them. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to if they're going to go forward with this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Javon?
Hi, thank you. My name is Jeevan Sobrino Wheeler, and I'm a resident of Cambridge at 19 Trowbridge Street. I'd ask the City Council this evening to support Policy Order 13 to call for full funding for subsidized housing programs, and Policy Order 15 to support the National Medicare for All Act. I recently found out that when my parents divorced, my mother and I moved into subsidized housing in Springfield, Massachusetts. I was on CHIP, a low-cost healthcare program for families that can't afford market-rate healthcare, and for years until my mom was able to secure a job that provided health insurance for me. And she went years without going to the doctor because she didn't have health insurance for herself. Today, my mom is a tenured professor at a public university, and I work at a land policy think tank in Cambridge. But there's a chance that neither of these things would have happened if not for public commitments to housing and to healthcare. I'd also like to speak briefly in favor of the cycling safety ordinance. Today, I biked from my home on Trowbridge Street and Harvard Square to Windsor Street near Kendall Square. This meant biking on dangerous streets for cyclists like Harvard and Broadway streets that don't have protected bike lanes. All it would have taken was one distracted driver, and I wouldn't be here to speak to you this evening. That's why I hope you'll support the cycling safety ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who did not sign up but would like to speak? Nate?
Hi, I'm Nate Fillmore, 13 Marcellus Street, number 3. I just wanted to speak briefly in favor of the cycling safety ordinance. I'm sure several others have spoken before, but thank you very much for considering it, and I hope that it passes in a few weeks. Also wanted to call out the results of the city's survey, which show overwhelming support in the city for further implementation of protected bike lanes, and a lot of people biking, something like 30% of the population biking themselves. on a regular basis. So I think that's certainly shows just how important it is for this ordinance to pass, and for not just for the ordinance to pass, but for there to be quick implementation of a complete network of protected bike lanes in the next 5 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none. On a motion by Vice Mayor Devereaux to close public comment, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and public comment is closed. We move to reconsiderations. There are none. We move to the city manager's agenda. On a motion by Councilor Simmons to bring the manager's agenda before us for discussion and adoption, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Pleasure of the council.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Toomey?
I'd like to remove items 1 through 5 and I'm going to charter rate each one.
That's all of them. Okay. Councilor Toomey has exercised his charter right on the city manager's agenda. We now move to calendar items. Pleasure of the council. There's nothing we can take action on, so we will pass over. Applications and petitions. Councilor Simmons. Councilor Simmons moves to adopt.
1 and 2?
Will they say adopt? Yeah.
Are you
To adopt 1 and 2. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to communications. Pleasure of the council.
Move to place on file?
Councilor Simmons moves to place 1 through 4 on file. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to resolutions. Pleasure of the council. Councilor Simmons.
Move to bring forward 1 through 10 for discussion and adoption, hoping the favorable will prevail and they will be made unanimous on adoption.
Bringing forward 1 through 10, making unanimous upon adoption. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Does anyone like to pull a resolution? No. On adoption of 1 through 10, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Move to policy orders on a motion by Vice Mayor Devereaux to bring policy orders before us for discussion and adoption. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Pleasure of the council. Councilor Kelly.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull number 10, please.
Number 3?
Councilor Simmons.
Number 3.
3. Councilor Zondervan.
13 and 15, please.
Mr. Mayor?
Vice Mayor.
Number 4, please.
Councilor Carlone.
Number 14, please.
Pleasure of the council.
Adopt the balance?
Hold on 1 second. I'm sorry. I'm going to pull. Oh, no, we're good. On the balance. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We move back to policy order number 3, that the City Council go on record urging MassDOT to revisit and review plans for the forthcoming Union Square station in Somerville with a view toward making the station more accessible to those with mobility impairments. This was filed by Councilor Simmons and pulled by Councilor Simmons.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Mr. Bill Cavallini, friend and colleague, and the other folks that came this evening to speak in favor of this order, in particular Mr. Cavallini, because he brought this to my attention because he's been participating on the Somerville side. We miss you here in Cambridge. Where is Bill? I think he's gone, but we miss him here in Cambridge. I'm bringing this order in because while we recognize that the work has already started in Union Square Station, and we recognize the difficult cutbacks were necessary to ensure that it moved forward, there is a continued frustration that cutbacks seem to always come at the expense with those with mobility issues. Yes, people in wheelchairs, those utilizing canes and walkers and so forth will still be able to access the station, but it's going to be more difficult for them to do so. They're going to have to travel a greater distance to access the station, and so if it's a 65-degree day, maybe that's not much of a concern, but when it's cold, when it's rainy, snowy, or sleeting, that can translate into more than just a minor annoyance. If you have a mobility impairment that is slowing you down, that extra 100, 200 yards can be significantly more challenging. So I know it's my hope that this order will change some things. when we reached out to DOT, they say the plans are drawn up, we can't change them, and I don't believe never say never. I think if we make enough noise or we stand up and say, you know, the city of Cambridge, just as well as Somerville, but the city of Cambridge made a substantial investment so that this Green Line extension could go through, and then to sort of cut Cambridge out, I think is pretty deplorable. Not to mention, and I speak mostly about people with mobility issues, but I just think of the impact it's going to have on small businesses in Inman Square. If people wanted to come to Somerville, to come into Inman Square, they may not want to work that hard if they're using public transportation. And the whole idea of public transportation is to get people into the streets, getting them walking, not being in their cars so much. So I'm hoping that this order passes. I want us to go on record standing in solidarity with the business owners in Cambridge and Inman Square in particular. And again, this is not a vote against Somerville. It's really it is a vote for accessibility, and it's a vote for fairness in particular to, again, the residents of that part of Cambridge, to the businesses on Inman Street or in Inman Square, and also it's a vote to support people with mobility issues. Just to think about how you at first have a waiver for Cambridge residents to get there, and then all of a sudden it costs too much, we're going to make it exceedingly difficult. I think it's a little hard for us to take. And so I want people to know that we haven't forgotten them. I don't want them to feel left out in the cold. So I'm hoping that this order will go forward, and MassDOT tries extra hard to meet the needs of the residents that may be using that station, particularly those from Cambridge.
Thank you. Councilor Carlone?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, I concur with Councilor, and knowing a great deal about federal transportation policy, this is against everything the American Disabilities Act states is a requirement. And it's not just an insult to Cambridge. Parts of Somerville are in between the station and Cambridge. Its own residents are being hurt. It could be a strategy to make more people use the retail in Union Square rather than Inman Square, which I sure hope it's not. But this, I can tell you on other stations that I'm working on in Winchester, not only is one elevator required, 2 elevators are required on each side in case one breaks down. So this is horrendous. I think personally we should even consider suing the MBTA as a member of a group that feels this is absolutely against every public benefit conceivable related to the T. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I couldn't have said it any better myself. I completely concur. This is outrageous, and it needs to be addressed. I'm in full support.
Thank you. Thank you also, Councilor Simmons, for bringing this forward. I totally agree. I bet we're all in agreement of this, and I think certainly maybe you and I need to schedule a meeting with some people and talk about this in addition to this resolution, to this policy order. Vice Mayor.
Sorry. Just a quick comment. I think there is a public meeting that the MBTA is holding this week at the Kennedy Longfellow School. I think it's 6:30. I'm just looking for the date on Wednesday night, and that would be an opportunity for people to go and tell them how they feel about some of these changes. They're going to be talking about station design and schedule and so forth. 6:30 this Wednesday at the KLO in the cafeteria.
Great, thank you. On adoption, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move on to policy order number 4, that the city manager is requested to consult with the Department of Public Works to report on the number of fines for failure to clear sidewalks issued from the winter of 2014-15 through the winter of 2018-19. This was filed by Vice Mayor Devereaux and Councilor Kelly. Vice Mayor Devereaux.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you, or I guess I don't have to be through you. Anyway, this is also a question of accessibility. All of us, I think, get alerts from the C-Click Fix Commonwealth Connect system, and after every snow event, my inbox is full of people reporting a sidewalk or crosswalk that hasn't been cleared. And so in as much as we want to use data to inform how we need to target resources and potentially change policies, I think it would be a really good idea to have a report on the data we have available about where these violations are occurring, how often they're occurring, are there repeat offenders? I know in my neighborhood there is a crosswalk that is never cleared. It's because the house on each side of the corner is essentially vacant. So what do we do in situations like that? At the same time, we're also, being sent articles by residents who say, hey, look, in other cities, both in the U.S. and in Europe, this clearing of sidewalks is a responsibility, it's a public responsibility of the government, and it's not just left to each property owner to do. And in some very enlightened communities, actually, the sidewalks are cleared before the roads. Whether we have the will and the resources to actually flip our whole outlook about what is the priority to clear. I know we have ambulances and emergency vehicles and so forth, school buses, that also need the roads. But at the same time, we do trust our residents, and it primarily is residential property owners who are responsible for many of the sidewalks that other residents are using. And some of them do a terrific job, and some of them do a terrible job. And we have tried, I think, very hard to communicate what the expectations are. We give violations, and yet after each storm, we have the same problems, often in the same places. So we have a lot of data online. I'm not super good at taking something like 6,100 entries and turning them into some sort of table or map that tells me what it should tell me. And so I'm hoping that our staff can do that and that we can have a public safety committee hearing to actually talk about what this tells us we should be doing. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Thank you. Councilor Simmons.
Thank you. I certainly support the order, and I just want to follow up. Sidewalk snow removal is clearly not created equal, and it does affect the elderly and the physically challenged even more. So it's funny we should be having this conversation. I just deleted off my phone when someone's coming down Prospect Street by, I shouldn't name businesses, by a business. One business had done a really good job of shoveling, and the other one hadn't touched it at all. So this woman comes out onto Prospect Street at 8:30 in the morning and goes all the way down to Deskey's, because that was the next clear spot for her to get back onto the sidewalk. And so I think it is time that we have a different conversation. Maybe it is something that we take on as a city and not leave it to private owners, particularly with the owner is an absentee landlord and has not conveyed to the residents there that someone needs to take on or doesn't take it up as a expense of being a property owner. Because I couldn't imagine what would have happened if that woman was struck by a passing vehicle that may not have seen her or went by too fast and just clipped her mobilized chair. And I know that the seniors advisors that I talk to monthly have asked DPW, what can we do to do better? They say, well, report it, but report it to who and how fast does that get taken care of? Because if you don't shovel fairly immediately and the next event is it's very cold, now that's ice. And it's really not going to be taken care of. And so I think it's something that we need to turn our attention to. So I appreciate getting the data, but then the next thing is, so what are we going to do? And is it something, I would certainly agree that maybe we might want to say, is this something that we do as opposed to leaving it to property owners to take care of?
Thank you. Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and certainly support this and concur with my colleagues that this is a problem. Logistically, I'm not sure how we would get enough crews together to do all the sidewalks in the city. But what I do think we should be doing is that if somebody reports a sidewalk that's not cleared, we should send a crew to clear it and charge the property owner for the expense. I don't understand why we don't do that. I've certainly had situations in my neighborhood where there was repeatedly a failure to comply, and after the fourth time that it was reported, the owner finally got a ticket and it was taken care of. But that's 4 or 5 days down the road. The data that's available, I just looked at it today, and it's very difficult to access. There's something like 4,000 hits on icy or unshoveled sidewalks on SeeClick Fix for Cambridge. The data is also not always correct because there was a report that I hadn't cleared the snow, which turned out to be the neighbors. Robert knows about that one. So anyway, it's really important to have high quality data available to us. We also wouldn't be able to tell from SeeClick Fix alone whether or not there was enforcement action. So we really need both pieces, the reporting as well as the enforcement data from the city. So I hope that we can get this report out quickly, but I do agree with my colleagues that we already know this is a problem, and we should be considering solutions to it.
Thank you. Pleasure of the council. On adoption, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to policy order number 10, that the city manager is requested to confer with the Community Development Department and other relevant staff to report to the City Council on how the data collected from the Broadway Eco Display is used to inform the city's transportation planning efforts and to address the possibility of installing additional eco display counters at the highest trafficked bicycle locations to provide more comprehensive information about bike use and other vehicles such as scooters. This was filed by Councilor Kelly, Vice Mayor Devereaux, and Councilor Zondervan, pulled by Councilor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I put a substitution amendment on everyone's desk that expands the ask about what the city's thoughts and actions are in counting both bicycles and things that aren't bicycles but aren't cars or necessarily cars as well. And it reads, and there's a Scribner's error in there, it should read, and if there are any other non-manual systems that the city uses to collect bike or other vehicle counts, including sensors, automated counters, or other electronic devices. Primarily, it's really what one might call a camera, but it doesn't necessarily capture a picture as much as just the shape of something going by. My understanding is it is very difficult to get anyone to do a traffic count with lines that you put across those stripes of electronic wire that count cars. People put cameras up and allows you to do all sorts of things with the data and so forth. I don't know where we are. If you get a chance and you go look at the EcoTotem information online, it's amazing what you can see. You can go worldwide and see all sorts of bike usage and so forth, and they have different types. I've always wondered how they work. They read the pneumatic pressure of the tire to figure out whether it's a car or whatnot. But basically the point is counting bikes is way more sophisticated than 15 people standing on a street corner with clickers. And I'm interested, and I think we all are interested in how the city is addressing these new sophisticated tools. So that's the substitute amendment I would propose.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
Happy to support the substitute amendment. I wanted to ask Councilor Kelly, principally, are you also thinking there are those cameras that are placed when a developer is seeking a special permit and they put cameras up to do traffic counts to show existing conditions and so forth? And I don't know, those aren't placed there by the city. They're usually by somebody that's been contracted by the developer. Are you asking for access to that? Can we ask for access to that?
I don't see why we can't ask for access to that. We may or may not be able to get it, but arguably that is something that could become a part of the special permit process. So if we put something like other systems that the city or other parties uses to collect bike or other vehicle counts, would that work?
Works for me.
Okay. Why don't we vote that amendment? On the amendment, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Any comments on the amended order? Councilor Carlone.
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to add that when a special permit requires a traffic study, you can ask for anything related to traffic. So that's very doable of what is being talked about.
All right. On the order as amended, all those in favor say aye. Those, what? On the substitute? Okay. So on Vice Mayor's substitute amendment, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Okay. On the order as amended, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move on to Policy Order 13, City Council support for fully funding the Section 8 Housing Choice Tenant-Based Voucher Program. This was filed by Councilor Zondervan, myself, Councilor Siddiqui, and Councilor Carlone. Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This resolution calls on our representatives in Congress to sponsor an amendment to the budget that would fully fund the Section 8 Housing Choice Mobile Voucher Program. The Somerville City Council has already made this ask, and it's my sincere hope that we can join them tonight. My office has been able to help several people facing eviction and instability in Cambridge by helping them obtain a Section 8 voucher so they can stay in their existing apartment. Section 8 is a hugely important component of our affordable housing strategy because it allows us to leverage existing housing to protect tenants from displacement while we figure out how to build more affordable housing. I really hope that my colleagues can support this and that we can work with our congressional delegation to make sure that this gets implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure of the council. On adoption, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We move to Policy Order Number 14, that the city manager direct the appropriate city staff to examine the need and possibility of neighborhood preference in Cambridge in the short and long terms. This is filed by Councilor Carlone and Councilor Zondervan. Councilor Carlone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a request for the city to work with the state to get the same agreement that the city of Boston has, and frankly other cities do in the United States. And all it is basically, if a community is losing low-income residents and new housing is being built with as many as 50 affordable units, as in Mass and Maine, that a greater priority than now goes to people who are being moved out of the neighborhood. The rationale for this is that if you're low income, you don't have many resources, and you're moved to a different neighborhood, that can be troubling. But if that neighborhood has a library, has a bus, better yet, mass transit, has a pre-K, whatever that is, you can relate to it. But when people move to a place like Alewife, where there's little or no social infrastructure, and quite frankly, none planned at the moment, which we hope to change, this is a critical issue. And I'm sure all of you have met people who have been moved to the far reaches of the city and are lost. You know, a woman just came in recently to talk to us about this. So that's all this is. There is a state law, not a state law, a state policy that says Cambridge can only talk about Cambridge, and what I'm suggesting is it's Greater Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, maybe Brookline. That's looked at on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis when there is available housing. If there isn't available housing, obviously a roof is very important, but if you ask people, it's a roof and a neighborhood that matters to them. And if it isn't their neighborhood, it should still be a fully serviced neighborhood. And we have one upcoming neighborhood that is not that. So that's where that comes from. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Carlone, thank you. You reached out to me to co-sponsor with this, and there was some, in some of the whereases, there was some corrected information that we wanted to amend in this, and we weren't able to coordinate between my office and your office. I'm going to charter write this for until next week. There's about 6 factual things in here that need to be updated, and rather than doing a million amendments, let's just resubmit it. But I am with you in the spirit of this. But there's some things in here, such as the City of Boston created the pilot program in 2015. It's really 2016. There's another thing that's misquoted. So there's just some cleaning up we got to do. So let's just, if we can do that over the course of the next week, that would be great.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't, Councilor Zondervan, before I, no, you're good. All right. So I will exercise my charter right on this, and then we'll get that fixed up. What was that? That was 14. We now move to policy order number 15, that the City Council go on record in enthusiastic support of the Medicaid for All Act of 2019, H.R. 1384, filed by Councilor Zondervan, myself, Vice Mayor Devereaux, and Councilor Carlone. Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This resolution would put the council in support of the Medicare for All Act of 2019, which has 106 co-sponsors in the House, including our representatives, Ayanna Pressley and Catherine Clark. There's an urgent need to reform our healthcare system because quality healthcare is a human right, and many people are only one medical crisis away from bankruptcy or life-altering debt, as we just heard about in public comment today. We spend more money per capita on healthcare than any industrialized nation. Yet we have the worst health outcomes, lower life expectancy, higher maternal and infant mortality rates, higher rates of obesity and diabetes, and many more. 30 million Americans remain uninsured, and another 40 million cannot afford their copays and deductibles. This bill would transform the country to a single-payer Medicare for all system over a 2-year period. In the first year, everyone over 55 and under 19 would be eligible. In the second year, everyone would become eligible. Every single person. This is an opportunity to simplify the system and completely eliminate out-of-pocket consumer costs. Coverage would be comprehensive, and folks would still be able to choose their preferred care providers. This would also allow Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices, as most countries already do, saving people money on pharmaceutical spending. Finally, this bill addresses a legitimate criticism of past iterations by fully preserving funding for the Veterans Administration and Indian Health Services. This means that veterans and indigenous peoples will continue to receive the targeted medical benefits and services they deserve, while expanding the range of services and providers available to these populations. I hope that we can make Cambridge the second city in the country, behind Seattle, to officially support this important legislation that would have a life-changing impact on every single one of our constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure of the council. On adoption, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to committee reports. Pleasure of the council. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I'd like to pull number 2 and 3, please.
Councilor Siddiqui.
I'd like to pull number 1, please.
Councilor Carlone.
Number 4, please.
Pleasure of the council. The question comes on number 5 of accepting the report and placing on file. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We go back to committee report number 1. A communication was received from Paula Crane, Deputy City Clerk, transmitting a report from Councilor Sumbul Siddiqui, Chair of the Economic Development and University Relations Committee, for a public hearing held on February 13th, 2019, to receive an update on the progress to date on the Retail Strategy Plan and Vacant Storefront Initiative. Councilor Siddiqui.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to mention briefly that the discussion was about this 2015 classification study and the fact that we heard a lot of some of the recommendations from that report. All of us in the committee agreed that there should be something happening with this. It's taken far too long. And Mr. Roberts talked about it is essentially a capacity issue. So I have been in touch with the city manager, and it seems that they had been trying to hire for people like Jeff, senior positions, and ultimately weren't getting responses. And so they have changed their approach to really looking for some more junior people. And I think opening it up and changing the description a little bit will essentially hopefully provide more capacity to the department. And then ideally we'll be hiring more folks anyway to help our community development department so that we can move things along, because our response that Mr. Roberts gave was maybe middle of the year, probably not, really hard to say, and I think that isn't acceptable. So we'll have a formal response from the city manager hopefully soon on next steps on this capacity issue, but I think this is something that we have to zone in on and focus. So just wanted to provide that update to my colleagues.
Thank you. Councilor Carlin?
I concur with Councilor Siddiqui that this is a problem. Another alternative would be to hire a consulting, have someone on a consulting contract who's highly experienced, and cities do that. And if this process doesn't work or the quality is not there, perhaps that would be the next logical step. Thank you.
On accepting the report and placing on file, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We move to committee report number 2. A communication was received from Donna P. Lopez, City Clerk, transmitting a report from Vice Mayor Jan Devereaux, Chair of the Transportation and Public Utilities Committee, for a public hearing held on February 26, 2019, to discuss the MBTA's Better Bus Project report as it relates to proposed changes to bus lines and service throughout Cambridge. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I think the Better Bus Project was misnamed, as many people have noticed. And this committee report raised a lot of questions and concerns. And so at our last meeting 2 weeks ago, we had a policy order that asked for this committee report, when available, to be sent to a number of state officials. So I hope that after we place it on file tonight, it can get to the state officials quickly. I know they're still going over all the public comment. It closed last week. I also, in deference to Heather Hoffman for having read the whole report and wanted correction to what she said, I found it it's on what is called page 216 of this agenda, and in 2 instances she talks about bus routes, and I believe she wants that changed to bus service. So for the clerk, on page 16, where Heather Hoffman's paragraph is near the top of the page, there are 2 instances where it says routes, and if you could just change that to service. That's her reward for a close reading of a committee report. That's above and beyond for a member of the public. And I also just want to say communication about these changes has just been so poor. We've been hearing from Cambridgeport residents that there's a whole kerfuffle over changes to the 47 route that runs through their neighborhood, Magazine and Pearl Street, that was rerouted during the reconstruction of Pearl Street and was meant to go back, and then all of a sudden they started seeing flyers that said that as of March, whenever, maybe today or whenever, it was going to change, and there'd been no notice, and it seemed that they were actually, it was in conflict with the changes with the route, they said, in the Better Bus Project, because the 47 was also in the Better Bus Project. So the whole thing seemed to suggest that the MBTA doesn't even know where its buses are going today, which is just kind of par for the course. So anyway, I hope that they heard a lot of public comment and that our state officials are actually listening, and that some of this will be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. On accepting the report and placing on file, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to committee report number 3. A communication was received from Donna P. Lopez, City Clerk, transmitting a report from Vice Mayor Jan Devereaux, Chair of the Transportation and Public Utilities Committee, for a hearing held on March 6, 2019, to discuss how transit benefit ordinances are being used in other cities to further sustainable transportation goals, and whether Cambridge could benefit from implementing a transit benefit ordinance. The question comes on accepting the report, placing on file, and adopting the 3 orders. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I principally pulled this so that we could adopt the 3 orders, but I just wanted to say that it was a very good informational meeting to tell us all what a transit benefit ordinance is, talk about the success that it's having in other cities. It's basically would be a requirement for larger employers to offer their employees tax-deferred benefits to spend on transit passes or van pools or potentially even bike sharing or bike commuting. And it's just another way of incentivizing people who are working in Cambridge to try to commute by something other than a car, particularly a single occupancy vehicle. So I guess the clerk will read the 3 orders. Is that how it works, or we just adopt them? Yeah, one of them asks the city solicitor to tell us if we need any state permission to enact one of these transit benefit
We can just,
ordinances.
if we adopt them, then
Okay.
as part of the report. So on accepting the report, placing on file, adopting the 3 orders. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We move to committee report number 4. Communication was received from Donna P. Lopez, City Clerk, transmitting a report from Councilor Dennis J. Carlone and Councilor Craig A. Kelly, co-chairs of the Ordinance Committee, for a public hearing held on February 27th, 2019, to discuss a proposed amendment to the municipal code in Title 12 entitled Streets, Sidewalks, and Public Places by adding a new chapter 12.22 entitled Cycling Safety Ordinance. The question comes on accepting the report and placing on file and passing to a second reading. Councilor Carlone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Almost everyone was at this committee meeting, so I don't need to go over it other than to say there was a lot of discussion and in-depth responses to questions. I did want to add that after this meeting occurred, I heard from a number of parents that thanked the council, I guess because I led the ordinance meeting, and that were grateful that their kids, small kids, will grow up in a city that has separate lanes. 7 people emailed me about that. So I move that others might have comments, I guess.
Any comments by councilors? Vice Mayor?
One comment. One of the items that was on the city manager agenda related to education and outreach to cyclists to try to help them understand the danger, particularly at intersections and cycling with trucks. And education is terrific, but the best way to protect cyclists from trucks and turning vehicles at intersections is to have protected bike lanes.
Councilor Kelly.
I'm sorry, my kid
I know you
got
couldn't
hit-
let that go, Councilor.
No, my kid got hit by a truck in Middlebury, Vermont. Right, the middle of Vermont. The kid has got more experience biking in his 18 years than anyone anywhere in 18 years, and he can still get hit by a truck someplace that doesn't have those things. So I failed him. I failed in teaching him how to bike safely. So for us to put all these eggs in infrastructure that is in Cambridge and say that is the most important thing we can do when our children go elsewhere and get hit by trucks, I just can't. I don't disagree with the importance of infrastructure here, but I don't think we can make that statement.
You know, I don't think that there's nothing guarantees that there won't be an accident or something won't happen, right? And we can put protected bike lanes on every street in the city, and somewhere at some time something's going to happen. Doesn't mean we don't do it. You know, there's a lot of things. Again, I come back to the infrastructure question. So a lot of people, we heard from East Cambridge tonight about traffic accidents. People run red lights all the time. We would never suggest getting rid of traffic signals because there are accidents at intersections with lights. You provide the best, safest infrastructure you can, and hopefully you prevent things from happening and things from going wrong. But undoubtedly, there are too many people on our crowded streets to say that something is going to be perfect. And I do agree, Councilor Kelly, that it's not just infrastructure, it's education, it's a lot of other things. But even with all that, I wish I could guarantee that no one was ever going to get hit again. But we can't guarantee that. But we can take every meaningful precaution to decrease those odds, and we should. Councilor Mallon.
I was just going.
You don't have to move it. Just
Thank you.
Councilor Mallon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to express my gratitude to everybody that participated in making this come to fruition. I know that this was a huge process, and a lot of people from Cambridge Bike Safety, from the mayor's office, Will Durbin, the city manager's office. A lot of times we get petitions in front of us that haven't fully been fleshed out, and this was a real example of when a lot of people work together really hard to get it to a place where we can all feel comfortable moving forward. I think is a model for moving forward, and I just want to appreciate and thank everybody that has been involved and done such hard work behind the scenes over the last year to get it to this place. And I'm really happy to support sending this to a second reading, but I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. So the question comes on accepting the report and placing on file and passing to a second reading. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Councilor Toomey is recorded as present. The ayes have it, and is sent to a second reading. We now move to roundtable minutes. Vice Mayor? Oh, I thought you were.
Yes.
I thought you were reaching for the mic.
Well, I was. Yeah, I was.
Okay.
You anticipated me. Thank you.
You know?
May I pull it? Just, yeah. There's one roundtable minute. And I will speak for less than a minute. Do you need to read any? You don't need to read any introductory prose.
No,
okay.
no, you got it.
Okay. Just for everybody, I think everybody here in this chamber was there, but just for anybody who happens to be listening at home, we held a roundtable with the school committee on the Tobin School reconstruction project, which, if you have not yet heard, is going to happen and will be a multi-million dollar, multi-hundred million, $250 million to be exact, project. We have one more school year in the Tobin Montessori Vassal Upper School, and then the students will be sent to swing spaces to be determined, and construction will start. Just for anybody who is anxious about what the building will look like or where it will be on the site, no decisions have been made. That was reiterated several times. What is happening now between the architects and the engineers and the city manager staff and so forth is a feasibility study that will go on at least through the summer into the fall, which will look at all of the voluminous environmental and geotechnical data, look at the programming goals, how many classrooms, what are the configurations, and try to come up with the best and most viable alternatives for how to site the school, whether to reuse parts of the existing school, how to configure the open space, and no decision will be made until probably early next year. So, and there will be lots of public process. So that just is my less than 1 minute, hopefully, summary of the roundtable.
Thank you. Councilor Mallon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I just also wanted to throw out a plug for, we have been talking a lot at the Arts Task Force about the 1% for Arts ordinance that has not always been 1% of the total hard costs. And I was really pleased to see that through our hard work on the task force, the city is committing to 1% of the hard costs of construction to go for funding the arts here in Cambridge, not just on-site public art, but also a yet-to-be-determined funding for the arts and the artists who create it here in Cambridge. So thank you to the City of Cambridge, and I think this is a great example of what the hard work that we're doing on the Arts Task Force to really look at all the different ways the city can be supporting its artists here in Cambridge. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. So on accepting the minutes, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now go to communications and reports from other city officers. Councilor Zondervan.
Thanks. Number 2, please.
And Councilor Siddiqui.
Number 1.
Number 1. We go to communication number 1. A communication was received from City Clerk Donna P. Lopez, transmitting a memorandum from Councilor Siddiqui, transmitting the submission of the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Task Force on Tenant Displacement February 24th, 2018 meeting minutes. Councilor Siddiqui.
Thank you. I wanted to briefly bring up the Richard Rossi Fund that was established in 2017. Truth be told, I didn't know about it before this task force, and I don't think a lot of people know about it. There's about $55,000 left in it. It's intended to continue to grow, so the task force has discussed ways to, make sure it grows, but then also make sure that our legal aid providers, our nonprofit providers know that it exists and can be used for many different things. First month's rent, security deposits, funds for families at risk of foreclosure, credit repair, funds for families at risk of homelessness. So it's great that we have this resource, and then we also have different resources as well, but I think it is important to think about how we are using this money and how it can continue to grow, because this is a fund that has been primarily funded by private donations. So there'll be more on that. We have a meeting on Tuesday at 5:30 to continue discussions on things the task force will be focusing on. So just wanted to update everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. On placing on file, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to communication number 2. A communication was received from City Clerk Donna P. Lopez, transmitting a communication from Councilor Zondervan, transmitting a memorandum regarding affordable housing overlay initial thoughts. Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did want to share this with my colleagues and give you a brief overview of what is in it, and hopefully it will contribute to our discussion about the affordable housing overlay. So the first thought is to focus on the transit corridors, and this is something that I've spoken with my colleague, Councilor Carlone, about in the past, where it provides a better opportunity cost because we're trying to encourage affordable housing developers to maximize the number of units that they could build at one time. That amortizes the cost. And along these transit corridors, we would have more opportunities to do that. Similarly, there are projects available. There's parking lots, there's single-story buildings that we could develop into affordable housing. And of course, it would be near transit, which makes it much better for people to live there. It also allows us to eliminate parking minimums, which further confers a cost savings to the developers. Now, in order for that to work, we have to make sure that we protect the ground floor retail that is in some of these buildings. And so I have some ideas about how we could do that. And of course, it creates opportunities for us to increase green space and tree canopy on these properties that currently might be more hardscaped. In terms of design review, and I defer to my colleagues here who are more expert on this topic, but it seems to me that in order to do this type of form-based zoning, we would essentially need to enumerate all the possible designs that could result, and then essentially pre-approve them so that we can avoid discretionary review down the road. And so I think we need to have a really robust conversation about how that could work. And then I introduced a couple of thoughts on promoting homeownership for folks who have been traditionally excluded from that opportunity, as well as the potential for right of return for people who are displaced from Cambridge and would like to come back. So again, I hope that you find this useful. and I look forward to our ongoing discussion of this topic.
Councilor Siddiqui, then Councilor Mallon.
Thank you. I wanted to touch on 2 points. The protect local retail. Just so you know, the CDD did come out with a one-pager and did discuss the fact that overlay provisions could require that ground floor retail be included in key locations and on properties that previously had active ground floor retail. So this is something that I know it came up, I think, in the fall, in the spring, but I agree as chair of the Economic Development Committee, we have to think about ways we are making sure we're helping our small businesses. The other thing I wanted to briefly touch on was the right of return. I also, because I've attended several Affordable Housing Trust meetings, I know that on their list of discussion items that they will be bringing to the council will be the preferences and inclusionary preferences. And so they've discussed this in different ways. And so I think I can, or we can, and many of us can reach out to Chris and Mr. Chris Carter and figure out what that timeline is, because they do have it on our radar to discuss preferences. And so I think that will, we should do that probably concurrently as we think about this. But I do know, because I've attended these meetings, that this has been something that there will be a trade-off. It has been a discussion for a long time. So I just wanted to provide you with that context. Thank you.
Councilor Mallon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to my colleague. Thank you for providing this via communication. I think it's a great way to have a substantive conversation so that we can read and digest the material over the weekend, and it's not just something we're just hearing brand new here in the chamber. And I want to thank my colleague, Councilor Siddiqui, for bringing up the Affordable Housing Trust and that particular initiative, because I know that that's something that is being worked on and that they're wanting to bring it forward. I wanted to touch on the first part of this, which was just incentivizing affordable housing and transit nodes, and you have a helpful list of some pretty major streets here in Cambridge. I think, on first glance, of course, you can add more units there, and it's something that you can definitely can get more bang for your buck on the transit nodes, and obviously you can be closer to our healthy bus routes. I would think about my neighborhood in mid-Cambridge, where I'm in between Broadway and I'm in between Cambridge Street, and they both have a bus, the 68 and the 69. So I would hope that placing an affordable housing building on my street would be, it's just as accessible to Broadway or Cambridge Street as actually living on the corridor. And, when we think about zoning, I really want to be careful that we're not bringing forward another form of redlining, and just having the affordable housing overlay in certain areas. I think we need to be really careful of the historical context of redlining and making sure that we're not bringing that forward. I could also flip the script on this a little bit and talk about the health hazards of living on a corridor, especially for kids. If we are thinking about family-size units and making sure that we keep families here in Cambridge, actually having them on main streets, building units on main streets, is probably not the best thing we want to do if we're thinking about childhood asthma, which is very prevalent. So if we are really thinking about protecting kids and making sure that we're building into the communities and into the neighborhoods, that's just something I want to be careful about thinking about, is the health hazards for kids. But again, thank you for bringing this forward. I was able to digest it over the weekend, and I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Councilor Carlone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Zondervan mentioned the benefits of being on a corridor. The other principal benefit is most of the one-story buildings are going to change in many of our lifetimes. In fact, I'm told parts of Huron Village are now up for sale, including Fresh Pond Grocery Store. and that same owner owns a good portion of that area. So you build where there's change. You build where the opportunity is. And that's parking lots, one-story buildings, and buildings in terrible shape. And that's historically where construction occurs. Now, if there are sites, especially corner sites, with a good backyard, absolutely you build there. But you will find the numbers will dictate that you build on the soft sites, because those are going to be the available sites. And the city has to invest deeply into these pieces of land as they become available. The council in the past and present has set development policy, either directly or indirectly, and actions in this council, the planning board and the manager's office have helped set, not intentionally, but helped set the housing crisis by insisting almost only on commercial development for 25, 30 years. And so we have to pay if we're serious. I'm not convinced the whole city is serious. I think the council is largely serious, if not fully. But when a site in Agassiz was available for $4 million and was not pursued, and a good 20 units could be built there, I don't think anything is, if that same thinking continues, nothing is going to be built behind houses. It's just not. And so these sites on the corridor, maybe they're not ideal in 100% of the ways, but they're ideal if you're not going to have a car in a garage. They're very ideal. If you need to walk to retail, they're very ideal. If you want a community, it's there. And that's where change will be occurring. Thank you.
So I think the question about, in terms of the corridors, is that is it a question of limiting this just to the corridors or including the corridors, right? So, Councilor Carlone, I think, makes good points, and eventually, I mean, whether we do this citywide or the market and the opportunities are going to really dictate what happens and what doesn't. But should we be limiting this to specific areas, or should we be creating as many opportunities as we can? Is a different question.
If I could just clarify,
please.
I totally agree. It's citywide, but realistically, the opportunities are going to be in very specific areas with a surprise or two in other areas.
Well, that's why I think a lot of the concern about what's going to happen in neighborhoods is probably is not really going to come to fruition the way people are afraid that it will. Vice Mayor.
Well, on the corridor, then there are different types of corridors. Route 2 is a corridor. We're building a lot of housing on Route 2, and I would definitely say that with the volume of traffic on Route 2, there is a concern for childhood asthma. I don't think that's really comparable to the corridors within the city. Fresh Pond Parkway, ditto, has a lot of single-family housing on it. Those people, get 40 to 50,000 cars a day. Given that this is going to ultimately be built over the next 10 or 20 years, potentially, hopefully we'll have a lot of electric cars, and then we won't have to worry so much about emissions. Obviously, there may be still some carbon pollution, but it will hopefully be less. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
So the question comes on, Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to briefly respond and really appreciate the feedback and comments. On the ground floor retail, I just want to clarify, because I was aware of the CDD report, that what I'm alluding here is to provide protection for an existing retail tenant in like one of these one-story buildings, so that the tenant can be temporarily relocated, the building can be built up into housing on the upper floors, and then the tenant has a guaranteed right of return at an affordable rent when the project is complete. So it's really about protecting the existing tenants in terms of the retail tenants. I completely agree with my colleague regarding the pollution aspect of it, and wanted to add that we will also have electric buses on these corridors. So I do think that we'll be cleaning up our pollution anyway because we have to. And in terms of redlining, I personally experienced white flight when I was a teenager in Florida. I'm very aware and very sensitive to that issue, and I think that we can absolutely address that through this type of approach. And I agree with my colleagues that it's unlikely that a lot of these projects would happen inside the neighborhoods. I do feel that if that's true, then why scare people by making it citywide versus limiting it to specific areas where we think it makes the most sense to do it. So I'm open-minded and looking forward to continue to discuss it, but those are just some of my thoughts on it.
Two things. On the retail, part of the reasoning or the foundation of the overlay is to make it more affordable for developers, which are mostly going to be nonprofit developers. I know people are concerned that this is going to be for-profit developers. We're talking about 100% affordable housing, to make it more financially viable for them to build projects. If we add more and more expenses on, like you have to relocate, that's a hard thing to do. Where are you going to relocate that business, moving expenses, bring them back at cheaper rents? I want to make sure that our good intentions don't, in fact, hurt what it is we're ultimately trying to do, which is to make these projects affordable. And then as far as I do want to reiterate that, the concern about if some of these projects happen in neighborhoods, we're talking, if in a neighborhood, you're mostly talking about no ground floor retail in most of these, right? If it's a 3-family house that goes on the market and an affordable housing developer buys it, you're talking from going from 35 feet to 45 feet. So, this sort of fear that, we're going to get these monstrous buildings that are going to, dwarf everything around them, you're talking 10 feet in most cases. And considering that the city, I don't know when it was, when the city downzoned, when the council downzoned the city back however long ago, maybe Councilor Toomey remembers when, a lot of the housing in these neighborhoods are non-conforming today because they were built under zoning requirements previous. And so the 4-story buildings are going to, in some of these neighborhoods, there are 4-story buildings there already. And, so again, I think this, I understand people's concern and fear, but I really think if you step back and look at it, you're not talking about huge dramatic changes to these neighborhoods. And, and not all changes is necessarily a bad thing anyway. Councilor Carlone.
You're right, Mr. Mayor. Most houses, if not all of them, were built before zoning, let alone a different zoning. And zoning was put into place to sort of replicate what was there, but to make it more open. So you're right. I think it's something like 3/4 of all buildings do not meet zoning in the city. But the other thing I wanted to mention, what I call village retail, the neighborhood retail, are the essence of those neighborhoods, no matter what neighborhood it's in. And I firmly believe the city has to step in, buy the land, and be responsible for the retail. And housing becomes like a condominium, ownership above, that it's a partnership, and we have to deflect the costs, those costs. We created it. The economy created it, and we influence the economy. And frankly, we can afford it. We have more resources than any other city in the state, maybe even the country per capita, that we don't use. And what's better than to preserve a sense of neighborhood and building affordable housing? I can't think of anything better than that.
Okay. Well, I think this is an interesting conversation, one we're going to continue to have in the Housing Committee and then beyond. So why don't we, Vice Mayor, I'll go to you, and then maybe we can wrap this up.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I think one of the reasons that this has caused so much alarm is that we still don't have any, for lack of a better word, case studies or sort of examples of, okay, we've got form-based zoning, which has now injected a whole nother element of uncertainty because none of us have ever had form-based zoning. And so it's one thing to say, well, it only adds another 10 feet. But if you actually look at various lot sizes and setbacks and stuff, you could build a really large building on some lots. And I think that, you know, we need, if that is a possibility, we need to say, here is what you could build on, you know, 5 or 6 sample lots, and actually have a conversation about that, because without that, we're all basically talking a conceptual framework that has not been really put into any zoning language or any design standards. And that obviously is causing alarm. And it's asking the public to essentially trust us. And I think, you know, we're at a pretty low point in the public trusting any form of government, from their friendly local city councilors to the friendly local nonprofit affordable housing developer, right up the food chain. So I think if we want people to feel good about this, we need to give them a lot more information than we've given them, so that you can actually know what it is to expect and how real the possibility is that, you know, a building of certain sizes would be on certain lots. So I assume that will be forthcoming, because without it, we're still basically just debating, you know, a very well-intentioned idea without anything behind it. And on the displacement of retail tenants, I certainly understand that it could be perceived as another burden for, you know, an affordable developer to have to then worry about, okay, what do I do with that store that used to be on the ground floor? Then the city has to step up and help, because the last thing we want is for this very well-intentioned initiative to result in displacing small businesses or in displacing residents who live here in what we refer to as naturally occurring affordable housing. And those will be some of the soft sites, some of the houses that aren't in great shape, that may have a couple of units of housing in them with people living in them for not top dollar rents. And, you know, if those are the ones that the affordable developers identify as worth redoing, then we've lost that family that may not qualify for one of the units coming back. And we don't want that outcome either. So we need to sort of think through how this actually will play out in the market. I think you said the market's going to dictate it, but that's what's gotten us into this whole, you know, pickle to begin with, is that the market has dictated it, and the market always screws us. So let's figure out a way that we are dictating what we want these developers to do, so that it comes out to meet the goals that we all have.
Right. I think there's obviously a lot of discussion still left to have. You know, but you know, I know that Councilor Siddiqui just talked about the task force on tenant protections. You know, that's going to be, there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle, you know, that are going to have to fit together, you know, if we're really going to tackle this. I'm going to go to Councilor Carlone.
I just wanted to add quickly, I know a great deal about form-based zoning. I've been a new urbanist, 20 years, and I'm certified in the field, and it is highly designed. And actually, I want to say something that opposes what my fellow councilor said. There is very strong design review throughout the whole process. It isn't just, oh, you got it, your massing's right, you're in. No, it's probably a better design review than what we're currently doing in the city.
Thank you. And again, you know, it's we're not going to come out with something that everyone is going to be satisfied with. I mean, that's impossible on anything, right? But we also, but again, this comes down to if at the end of the day, and I tend to think we will, feel that this is something that is going to be helpful to addressing our affordable housing crisis, then, I'm not going to make a decision based on a poll as to how many people show up for or against something. There are going to be some people who are never going to be on board with this, period. There are going to be some people with more information might change their mind and be supportive, and there are some people that are already, a lot of people that are already supportive of it. So I don't think any one group speaks for the entire city, and I think we just have to continue to work through this. But eventually something will be in front of us, and it's probably not going to have everything in there that I like, and it's probably not going to have everything in there that someone else likes. But at the end of the day, is it going to be something that we feel is going to move us forward? So with that, the question comes on referring this to the Housing Committee. On adoption, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Do we have any late orders or resolutions? We do not. Announcements. Tomorrow, 7 o'clock, vigil on City Hall lawn. Yet another time that we are gathering, not in celebration, but to mourn. We have done this way too many times, but we will continue to do it as a show of solidarity and support. So I hope to see folks there. Councilor Siddiqui? Thursday?
Yeah, Thursday and so many, but on the more serious note, the vigil tomorrow, this was a act of white supremacy and terrorism, and I think both of us and Councilor Mallon were at the mosque on Prospect Street on Friday, speaking to the congregation and making sure that they feel safe and doing whatever we can to support our community. We have an event on Thursday. Starts at 5:30. The food's at 5:30. Cambridge Digs Deep. It's our 4th session. It'll begin at 6. It's at Cambridge Ringe and Latin main cafeteria, and Dr. Danisa will be lead. Yeah, 5:30 to 6 will be food, and then 6 is when we'll start. So, and Dr. Danisa Monte is leading the session. So we hope to see you at that. And then finally, I wanted to put on record and congratulate the Cambridge Ringe and Latin for making it on to the finals for the Massachusetts High School Drama Festival, which I did for many years. They have a show at Cambridge Ringe and Latin at 7 p.m. on Saturday. I'm going if you'd like to join me. They will be also performing at finals at the John Hancock Center the following Friday at 6 p.m. I may go to that too because I'm a theater geek. So just wanted to put that on the record and hope you join me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Seeing none, on a motion by Councilor Toomey to adjourn, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.